Well, welcome back. It is now the 16th of April, and I hope you've been benefiting and finding the last few days an experience that opens you up to the Franciscan understanding of the world and how it impacts on those who seek to live the gospel life via a Franciscan framework. Yesterday we talked about joy and the fact that at the heart of love and joy are part of the two of the three notes that take us through our Franciscan. You should find that someone who claims to be a Franciscan or actually claims to be a Christian should have this deep joy and this deep love. The other note was humility, and what I'm going to speak about today leads into that, because humility is about having a really, as St. Paul would say, a sober assessment of who we are. It's not to be down on ourselves. It's not to say that we're worse or better than anyone else. It's that humility is about having the correct perspective, knowing who we are in relationship to God and with other people, and living that out fully, not diminishing ourselves and not promoting ourselves. And unfortunately, as with many spiritual paths, but particularly the Franciscan one, what St. Francis showed us was that actually the gospel of Christ is a gospel of downward momentum, of self-emptying. It's not one of these spiritual practices that seeks to elevate you and take you into the heavenly realms. No, it takes us down deeper into the earthly realm and a greater connection with it. And therefore, it's mostly a journey that takes us through suffering and disillusionment. But that's not where it leaves us. So don't worry about that. So if you think this is sounding awfully heavy, well, it is, yet it's not, as in the most paradoxes within spirituality. What it is the suffering is caused by the recognition that in most of our lives we are fairly ego-driven. And we have to learn to let go and let our ego self, that image that we've created, that whole world that we've created around us, die to some degree in order to enable Christ to live. Jesus talked quite often about the fact that you needed to die before you could live. You know, if a seed doesn't die, it can't produce its fruit, for instance, in John 12. And so the Franciscan path particularly is an emphasis on allowing those things to die. As we know, Francis was this character, before he gave his life to Christ, he was this character that was the life of the party. He still was afterwards too, but in a very different way. But he had ideas of grandeur, to go off and be a knight, to fight for Assisi and defeat the Pugian army up the road, and all that thing, and to elevate in from the merchant class into the minor nobility class. So he had these great ideas of grandeur that he would. And he thought he was going to be important in the world. Well, the thing about suffering and disillusionment and losing some of those dreams and aspirations we've had is that we don't actually lose the dreams and aspirations, because actually the dreams and aspirations may well be from God. However, often our ego gets in the way we interpret them. We want to be in control of how they end up looking. you may want to be a great, politician or surgeon or something like that. God may still see you as becoming a great surgeon or a great politician or something like that. However, the way that may work itself out, if you follow through the path that Francis shows us into Christ, may well mean that it's not one that glorifies yourself. Well, it won't be one that glorifies yourself. It's one that will show a light to Christ. And it's one that you would need to let go of control of. You may not be the wealthy person at the end that you may have imagined yourself to be in a very comfortable life. You may be one of those surgeons that ends up working in the largely in the developing world where there is no salaries for sake of other than to perhaps live, but your work is great and it shows and it shines a light towards Christ, not towards yourself. So the suffering generally comes in the fact that we lose that ego-drivenness of ourselves, the fact that we want to be in control of everything. Well, the Franciscan path, spiritual path, wrestles that away from us. And as another Franciscan says, Richard Rohr, you often have the order, disorder, then reorder. And the Franciscan path takes you from the order, which is where you've got everything nice and neatly packaged, and you're seemingly in control of everything. You know where your life trajectory is. You're going off to be a knight, and then there comes the disorder, where you have to let those somewhat childish things disappear, those ideas that you're in control of your ultimate destiny to die. But then always there comes reorder. So you go through suffering, which leads you into disorder, which in the Franciscan sense we call disillusionment. So you don't know what's happening, where you are. You really don't know what life is going to come out. But then God in his great grace lifts you out of that into a reorder. You will still have all those same passions. You'll still have your aspirations, but they will be reordered, not around yourself and your own ego, but they will be reordered around Christ. And they'll be much more fulfilling. So the Franciscan path is a path into letting go. Just as Jesus did when you get that wonderful poem from St. Paul, he emptied himself. It's a kenosis. He emptied himself of all that he was entitled to, all that godliness, and became human, fully human. And it's the same path that the Franciscans, St. Francis showed us, and has been the path of the Franciscan spirituality since. It's a path of emptying ourselves, of going through the suffering of dying to ourselves in order to live in Christ. And that will mean letting go. And I'm just going to read this little bit from Brother Ramon. For Francis, it was the destruction and the reinterpretation of his early troubadour ambitions, and a later constant renewal under understanding of Christ's word. Francis, build my house, which you see is falling into ruins. There, Francis took that literally and tried to rebuild the church that he was in, whereas actually what God was really trying to tell him was to not worry about the building so much, but to build his church, the people. For us, it may be the destruction of romantic notions of following Christ or living a Franciscan vocation, the talking up of the cross of discipleship in ways we had no bargain for or thought impossible previously. But always it will be transformation, the reorder, transformation, into new experience of God, a dying to our own insistence of independence, control, and pride, or a more radical interpretation of our own pilgrimage. So, as we do this Franciscan journey, I urge you to consider the possibility of learning to let go of things and some of your ambitions and trajectories in life that are centered around your own control. Allow God to take you through that process of letting go, of emptying yourself, of suffering and through disillusionment into a new reinterpretation, which will lead to reorder or transformation, which will actually make those things, your heart's desires, which are God-given, even more real and tangible for you.